This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Andrade Games. In episode 149 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at Andrade Games' 1917 The Alien Invasion, a German-developed vertical shooting game that touted itself as a memorization bullet hell shmup. In the end, it was a solid game despite some issues. However, it wouldn't be the last we'd see of this game thanks to some big updates, and a recent release to none other than the Nintendo shmup, Switch. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX was initially an update to the base game on PC, but was most recently ported by Koiran Games and released to the Nintendo Switch on June 21st, 2018. This specific version of the game features a host of additions to the existing one, including 3 extra ships, 3 extra stages, and even a 2-player mode. Let's take a closer look. The gameplay in 1917 The Alien Invasion DX isn't much different compared to its original version. There are a couple of major tweaks on the outset though. Primarily, players now have access to 4 planes in total. 2 are available right on the outset, and 2 more are unlocked by satisfying specific requirements. More on that later. Players have 8-way control over their aircraft using the left analog stick or the D-pad on a Switch-compatible controller. Curiously, the right analog stick also controlled the player's craft as well. Each craft has its own movement rate, which adds a tiny bit of flexibility to the game when it comes to being able to navigate the screen at a comfortable pace. Players fire their main cannons with the A button. Each plane has its own fire pattern, which can be upgraded by 4 levels to a maximum level of 5. This is done by collecting power-up icons which appear frequently in every stage. A heavy shot with various movement penalties is also available, which is activated with the B button. This heavy shot will slow movement considerably and in some cases result in recoil, but there's no better way to deal a ton of damage in little to no time. The heavy shot is also powered up in conjunction with the main shot's level. Finally, a screen-clearing attack known as the Valkyrie is activated with the R and ZR buttons. This powerful attack is useful in crowded situations where players may need a quick escape from danger. However, only 1 Valkyrie is typically granted per life, with no way to replenish them. Shields can be obtained by collecting blue S icons, which envelops a player's ship in a glowing electrified barrier. Getting clipped by an enemy or its fire while the shield is in place will save a player from death and release a revenge attack. This attack explodes out in 8 directions, dealing heavy damage to anything it hits. With no shield though, players are blasted into smoke and dust. Colliding with static obstacles will also kill a player dead regardless of shields. Interestingly, players have no lifestock in 1917 The Alien Invasion DX. Instead, a death counter keeps track of the amount of times a player dies through their game session. But here's where things get a little sticky. When a player dies, they are sent all the way back to the beginning of the stage, even if they've made it to the boss. The player's score is maintained, but they have to get through the whole thing all over again. While this means that the player is technically never continuing, it also means that every game is technically a 1cc, and the score subsequently climbs constantly as a result. It's still pretty annoying to have to do the entire stage over again. Even a checkpoint would have been welcome here, and you know how we feel about checkpoints. One interesting new addition to 1917 DX is the Asymmetric 2-player mode that lets a friend join in on the game. When a second controller is detected in-game, a secondary green craft will appear on the screen, controlled by the second player. Like Player 1, Player 2 has access to a main shot, but that's it. No heavy shots or Valkyries are available to the second player. But while the second player cannot collect shields or multiplier locks, they can collect weapon pickups. They can also fly over and through obstacles on the screen. However, if they are hit by enemy fire, they will be completely immobilized until the next stage. This lack of mobility can also cause problems, which we'll take a look at shortly. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX plays over the course of 8 stages rather than the original 5. It's very clear that these extra stages were also kind of tacked on at a different time than the first 5, as each actually has a much more reserved difficulty, especially compared to the incredibly brutal 5th stage. On the whole though, memorizing each stage shouldn't take an especially long time, and players can see the end of the game with enough dedication and practice. There are also harder modes that exist as players unlock extra planes. The third aircraft, known as the Sturmdecker, cannot use shields but has 2 Valkyries. This is generally considered the intermediate difficulty. The fourth and final plane, the Fleischdecker, enables a true hard mode. While it has a ton of very effective firepower and great mobility, the enemy firepower is increased by several magnitudes of intensity. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX needs to be finished at least twice to unlock everything. So that's the gist of it all, and it sounds pretty easy, but whoa, hold on there matey, there are some serious catches to it all. First up, the overall control to this specific version of the game is less than impressive. We have a bunch of controllers that work with the Nintendo Switch, and every single one of them creates an insane over-input to the player's movement when using the directional buttons or D-pad. No matter how lightly the input is feathered, the player's craft will dart in the direction well beyond the input's time. Analog control is much sharper by contrast, despite not even really being analog. The sticks, and only the sticks, behave just like a digital input, allowing for tap dodging and the like, which is not only frustrating, but baffling as well. These control issues make for a pretty frustrating time, especially in narrow corridors where collision with the walls, no matter how slight, means instant death. Stage 5 in specific is the most egregious example of this, with our playthrough seeing upwards of 70 deaths. But Stage 5 also suffers from a peculiar issue resulting in an insane lack of performance. If a specific group of enemies isn't killed, the game drops frames like nothing we've seen on the Switch. Especially given the stage, it makes things almost impossible to navigate, no matter the controller or ship chosen. The 2-player mode is a bit broken as well. When the second player ends up getting hit, their ship will just kinda hang around on the screen in a semi-transparent state without the ability to move. You know, instead of just kind of exploding and leaving the play area. This can cause certain large shots that collide with this ghosted ship to explode out in a bright shower of sparks that completely obscures the screen, without nullifying the bullets in question. This can definitely make for a pretty frustrating time. If the controls were refined, especially in the case of digital control, the game would be pretty fun to play, brutal checkpoint system and all, but these tweaks are sorely needed as it is. To see the end of this game will take a while and not in an especially good way. Still, if players have the patience for it, 1917 The Alien Invasion DX works fundamentally. It just needs a patch or 3. The key to scoring in 1917 The Alien Invasion DX is using combo locks to build and lock a score multiplier through any given stage. Learning and knowing how each stage flows is the best way to utilize these locks, and a good sense of timing will see players get the highest scores. When a player collects a green key icon, the multiplier is unlocked and can be built by taking out enemies. A lot of these foes will explode into bloody chunks that can also be hit, and helping keeping the multiplier gauge up until the next enemy is dealt with. As long as part of the multiplier gauge is full, players can continue building it until they collect a red key, which locks it. A player can simply leave this locked in place and collect a multi-hundred times multiplied score on everything, or they can unlock it in an effort to grow it further. But if the gauge depletes fully in any case, the combo will be lost and the player must start again. Additionally, if a player dies, they will lose their combo, regardless of whether it was locked or not. Players also get a 1000-point bonus for every power-up they collect beyond level 5 power, and for each shield collected while the shield is in place. These scores, once again, are very small by comparison to the multiplied ones, so players should focus on keeping the multiplier combos up as long and as high as possible. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX only has local leaderboards, so as always, taking a screenshot is really the only way to share scores. Of course, with enough patience, players could just milk the whole game for an absurd score over the course of 300 deaths, so these scores may not actually hold much weight. And that's kind of a shame since the lock system offers excellent risk-reward and requires a fair bit of skill and strategy to get up as high as possible, so it's just kind of wasted. Perhaps a dedicated scoring mode could be implemented where players just have 3 lives. Then and only then could a player rank in, because I mean, look at this score. Come on. That's not even skill. We're sure that some people out there will probably dig the edgy, blood-soaked presentation that 1917 The Alien Invasion DX sports, but it's definitely an acquired taste that we haven't really grown accustomed to. By comparison, even games like The Binding of Isaac don't approach the levels of gore and nudity that you'll find in 1917 The Alien Invasion DX. Visually, there's a lot going on here, featuring a higher res pixel art style that packs more pixels into the same screen size compared to other retro-style titles. A lot of detail was able to be brought out as a result. Most enemies also have a decent amount of animation to them as well. As far as visuals go, it's pretty easy to pick out enemies from their shots while separating it all from player elements. But man, is there a ton of gore. There's always a ton of blood all over the place, whether from defeated enemies, menu decoration, or players meeting their end. Whenever a boss is defeated though, a huge amount of gore covers the camera and a huge gaping hole is left wherever the boss's torso or head or whatever used to be. It's pretty intense for a game that's only rated T, especially with all of the bare, implied, and literal genitalia and naughty bits all over the place. Yeah. On the other hand though, 1917 The Alien Invasion seems heavily inspired by imagery from heavy metal, and that would actually explain a ton. 1917's sound is a mixed bag, with less great elements than we'd like as well. This is once again purely taste, but the music outside of the first stage is, well, it's music we guess. The march at the ship select is easily the strongest piece, while stage 4 in specific has us wondering if the original recycled piece from our previous review was a better fit after all. On the bright side, all of the sound effects in the game work well for their applied use, with the exception of the voice samples, and we're gonna get it right this time. They're super killer instinct in tone, especially the after defeating every boss. Again, this is purely taste, and some players out there might get more mileage out of what's here than others. 1917 also has some other overhauled elements, especially the title screen. Its UI is pretty clear and easy to navigate, and the in-game interface features all kinds of elements that give it quite a bit of personality, especially the combo lock mechanisms and the portrait of Dr. Stahlmuller and her cheeky remarks in the corner of the screen. 1917 also features a huge array of languages for players of any nationality to understand it all. So, how does 1917 The Alien Invasion DX stack up? Let's take a look. 1917's control barely suffices through the controller's analogs, but suffers tremendously with directional buttons and D-pads. This is absolutely an aspect of the game that needs to be fixed. It may seem as if 1917 is super hard, but once players memorize where everything is, with the exception of a couple of really sticky bits in Stage 5, it's more than forgiving. The hard mode through the Fleischdecker is where 1917's true challenge lies. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX will last a while when trying to memorize the best plan of attack, but it really only needs to be completed 3 times to get the most out of it. The scoring system can be exploited pretty badly, so it doesn't really help 1917's replayability. The high-res visuals work well here, but come off quite a bit on the gory side of things. Add to that some comparatively explicit, naughty bits, and you get visuals that become a tad uncomfortable for us. Great sound effects work well in 1917, but the music is fairly weak. The voiceovers do still work here in the end, but still come off as impressions from Killer Instinct. The ideas here are pretty sound when it comes to the ingenuity factor in 1917 The Alien Invasion DX, but a lot of the best features are marred by too harsh penalties and less than good control. We're certain that if the controls can be tightened up, and in the case of the D-pad totally overhauled, 1917 would be a much more solid game overall. Better mechanics in co-op mode would be a blessing, especially being able to move a felled 2-player ship. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX is only about $8 on the eShop, so at the very least, if players are curious, it wouldn't cost much to check it out. There's more than enough content here to warrant an $8 purchase, as long as the critical aspects of the game can be fixed. 1917 The Alien Invasion was a game that was moderately enjoyable on PC, but we don't understand how the controls could have suffered so badly in this port. It desperately needs control fixes. It takes a while to train up on an analog stick for D-pad style play, but it can be done. At any rate, it's finishable and we unlocked everything in the game, so it's definitely not a deep blue situation. 1917 The Alien Invasion DX gets a 3 out of 5. You can get a copy of 1917 The Alien Invasion DX on the Nintendo eShop for about $8. Man, I've gotta say, I can't believe this game is only rated T with that huge golden dong at the end. Maybe the ESRB saw something else, and maybe I misinterpreted it, but I mean, come on.